I have been summoned to discuss DeAndre Hopkins. See you after the jump. The Lions just traded a conditional 2026 7th round pick for a kicker. Why wouldn't they do that to pick up DeAndre Hopkins, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL? There are actually a few reasons why they would not do that. The first is his contract. Like there's a thing where it was voided in 2024 if he hit certain milestones. But to do that this year, he'd have to have 179 catches, not happening. 2,404 yards, also not happening. 23 touchdowns, also not happening. Or somehow be named All-Pro 3 times in 1 year, which I guess, like, kick returner. And if he played a position on defense, that's possible, but I can't imagine that has ever actually happened. So the deal also was 2 years, $34 million. And that's the absolute uppermost ceiling of a potential DeAndre Hopkins deal. It won't be more money than that unless it is longer than that, which decreases the likelihood of Hopkins actually seeing the end of the contract because he's 30. He has had injuries and suspensions in the last 2 years. He's only played 19 out of 34 possible games in 2 years, and he just turned 30. He got popped for PEDs, but it was while he was recovering from surgery, and he played really well afterward, which generally when guys get popped for PEDs, they don't come back and continue being on said PEDs. But he didn't play in week 17 and 18, so there's health and or effort questions, which just on his deal didn't make sense for teams. If that's why the whole NFL kind of turned that down conceptually, if that makes sense. And did I mention he's 30? But here's why they could consider signing him as opposed to trading for him. The first thing is nobody's future contract is getting messed up by DeAndre Hopkins. Nobody's backing up $20 million a year to sign this guy, or they would have just traded for him. Something like 3 years, 45, or even 4 for 60, knowing that last year is probably not going to happen. That could be something that could have worked. But as far as future contracts go, at the wide receiver spot, the Lions only have Amon-Ra and Jamo under contract next year. That being Amon-Ra, Jamo, and D-Hop doesn't really stop them from doing anything ever, if that makes sense. Like they might extend St. Brown before the 24 season, but if they do, it's going to be a long contract. So his cap numbers won't get big until DeAndre Hopkins is no longer a factor. Like realistically speaking, D-Hop probably has 3 years at the most of productive play, and Amon-Ra's contract would likely start getting big in about year 3, which would be the year after DeAndre Hopkins was most likely gone. Reynolds, Jones, and Raymond might not be brought back. But if you would rather have any of those guys than DeAndre Hopkins, I don't know what to tell you, because that's madness. Those guys combined for $11 million in cap space, that likely all but covers DeAndre Hopkins' second year, if that makes sense. Like it'll probably be higher than that, but that $11 million will be more than half of DeAndre Hopkins' cap hit. So DeAndre Hopkins, and there's really nothing else. Like the same thing goes for St. Brown. The same thing goes for Goff. If he does sign a contract next year, the cap number will not be prohibitively large until like 2026 at the absolutely earliest, probably 2027. If that makes sense, which like contracts, the cap hit starts small and gets bigger as the years go. That is just the way NFL contracts work to varying degrees, pretty much without fail. So even Jonah Jackson, re-signing him next year has nothing to do with DeAndre Hopkins. Because by the time his cap hit is huge or even big, basically DeAndre Hopkins is no longer a factor. Same thing for Sewell. Same thing for McNeil. all of those guys, if they re-sign next year, will be re-signing long-term extensions. And if they're not signing long-term extensions, they just won't sign until the next year, which pushes their big cap hit even farther into the future beyond the years where DeAndre Hopkins will even be here. Have you followed me so far? The same thing goes for all of the defensive backs that are on a one-year deal in 2023. If CJ Gardner-Johnson comes back after this year, it's going to be on a longer than one-year deal. He's the kind of player where this is basically the team is feeling him out and he's feeling out the team, if that makes sense. Like, is Aaron Glenn back next year? That probably plays into whether or not Gardner-Johnson would want to come back as well. But at that point, that would be 3 hiring cycles where his defensive coordinator of choice didn't get a job somewhere, and it generally doesn't just magically happen shortly thereafter, if that makes sense. Like, if the league passes on him 3 times, there's a pretty good chance Aaron Glenn is here for a long time. Emmanuel Mosley. If he's back, it's probably not going to be on a one-year deal, and if it is on a one-year deal, it will not be a big one-year deal. Halapoulivaati Vaitai. Like, do they even want him back? I have absolutely no idea, if that makes sense. Like, are you guys following this so far? It's not that complicated, really. Last year's draft class doesn't hit free agency until 26. So they won't have cap hits that matter until at a bare minimum 27, which again, like, DeAndre Hopkins is not signing a 8-year mega deal. Like, this is not going to be a Megatron contract where every year you can't cut him even if you wanted to, or if he retires, it's the end of the world. This will be a deal where he gets a nice big signing bonus, but you probably save money any year that you want to move on from him. That's just when a receiver is over 30 and is coming off of injuries, suspensions, all sorts of things that give you questions. Like, that's kind of what you're dealing with. Like, I don't think he is going to come to the Lions for a one-year deal. That's probably not an option. Like, the Lions would have to give up more than that, but the good news for Lions fans who would like us to pick up DeAndre Hopkins is there is absolutely nothing preventing the Detroit Lions from doing that other than wanting to, and him wanting to come to Detroit. Have a good day.